Welcome back, everybody, to AI Week, where AI will continue until morale improves.
You can't spell Windows without AI. Oh, wait.
You can't spell Teams without... Nope, can't spell win. Nope.
But you can spell
Pain?
You can spell
Pain, there
suck
you go.
with you.
Can't spell pain without AI.
We'll come up with something pithier.
So I have some pain to pick with Google.
Mm.
I would like them to strongly reconsider their AI thing being called Bard.
I was wondering if you're going to bring that up.
Because it is very similar to my name. And now I see
rewrote-
Bard everywhere, and I think they're
I wrote it incorrectly as your name twice yesterday. Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you could go ahead and not do that, as everybody named Alexa's writing an email going, well, just think if it was my name.
It's not fair. Brad is artificial, but he's not intelligent. I nailed it.
Wow. Came for the podcast, left with the feels.
Yeah. I wonder how they arrived at that name. It's kind of a curious
It's some
choice.
language model or something, or one of them had an ex-boyfriend named Brad, and they really wanted to get back at him.
Okay. Well, I did think it was a curious choice. Bard is it's a strange name.
Just rolls
it's
right
a word
off
I
the
only know
tongue.
because of the Bard's Tale. The video game from the 80s.
Like, I know we went through decades of making fun of Silicon Valley for coming up for names for like colorful, fruity names for whatever product.
Sure.
And then Google's like, Bard. It's just...
Well, like every Intel code name ever, like these like unpronounceable native Oregon names where everyone says it slightly differently.
Yeah.
Bard.
It's
It's
like they
just
went to,
Bard.
like the school of brutalism and like, what's a terrible name we can think of our new overlord?
Mm. Yeah.
Although I will tell you, by everything that Google is doing right now, they feel like very much in a reactionary state rather than sort of a like leading the market state, if that makes sense.
I don't understand. I feel like it's impossible to position what Google's doing as anything other than reactionary and defensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. Like wait a week. What? Like rushing this out now makes it seem like exactly what it is, which I feel like from a PR perspective you'd like to avoid. Like you were caught on your back heels.
Mm-hmm.
You had no plan to do anything like this. Oh my God, what's happening over there? We have to address this. Like, it's, a lot like the internet stuff that Microsoft finally woke up to in the late 90s or, maybe that's the best example. I mean, it felt like exactly what it was, And the thing is, when Bill Gates got up on a stage in whatever year that was, 1995, I think December, right? Said that, you have awoken a sleeping giant, and they had, Microsoft stopped work on everything and then pivoted on the internet. And Microsoft at that time dominated personal computing, period, full stop. Google is a big company, and they absolutely dominate search, but they don't really have the same market power that Microsoft had,
In comparison.
Respectively. I mean, obviously they're a bigger company than Microsoft was at the time, but as far as like a percentage of the overall market, I mean, they're just one of the companies. Like, the thing that's interesting about this is, imagine Google wins, right? Let's say Google utterly defeats Microsoft in AI somehow. And that's a real harsh way to look at it, but just imagine that's what happens. Microsoft just continues forward. They're fine.
Yeah.
They have a huge diversified business. It's all cloud computing. It's great. Everything's fine. They're still a huge company. If Google gets defeated in this, they're gone. They disappear. And it's a strange thing to say. Like you'd have to invent some magic device that comes along and makes people stop buying iPhones, which would make people stop buying everything that Apple makes. And that company would become vastly diminished in a way that is impossible to contemplate.
Mm-hmm.
Like this really is an existential threat to Google, and I think if I was, again, I'm not like I'm some kind of business genius, but I feel like part of the conversation internally should be like, we need to present this in such a way that it doesn't seem like an existential threat, So we'll see what they do, but I just feel like it has the feel of running scared to me.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, that's the interesting thing, and somebody else pointed this out, and I can't remember who did it, but Google has been like an industry leader on publishing papers and research documents on all this stuff for years. But
Yeah.
what they pointed out is they struggle to turn things from a paper into a product. And
Sure.
they've just been
Well-
floundering because it to your what you're hinting at is that it touches on their core business, and that's real scary to them, that to put anything out there that's not basically advertisement driven.
By the way, I feel very strong. In fact, I bet the facts will support this, that Google did have this technology a couple years ago, whatever, looked at it and said, yeah, this is way better than what we have. This is going to get people to where they want to be much faster. We can't monetize this with ads. Like, it can't work. So that might be why they didn't do it. And this is the whole innovators. No, that's the wrong term. Is it the when you dominate a market and something new comes along, you as a company can't embrace that new thing because you're still doing the old thing. It's what happened to Windows. It's what didn't happen to Apple, right? Remember, the iPod was so dominant, and Steve Jobs was like, hey, what's going to unseat this? And they kind of talked about it. They decided it would be the phone. They're like, all right, let's make a phone. And like they disrupted their own market. That's what makes Apple what made Apple kind of special, I would say, under Steve Jobs. It's hard for companies to walk away from the thing that's successful. So Google has already made that mistake. I think they walked away from something that was better than what they had, and they were like, let's just be quiet about this, not thinking anyone or hoping that no one else would come up with that thing. They're really vulnerable, and it's a weird thing to say because they're I'm sure they're one of the top 5 companies in the world by market cap, something like that. They're huge, right? And we all rely on them every single day.
Yep.
But we all relied on horse and buggies and steam engine trains and whatever else. I don't know.
We used to churn
VCR
butter by
tapes.
hand.
That's right. We used to, during the hard times of the war, we would pour yellow dye into oleo to make it a little more like butter. Yeah.
That's what Papa
All
John's
kinds of-
did with their garlic dipping sauce many years ago. It's still
Exactly.
used to be actual garlic dipping sauce. Now it's just like vegetable oil with
Yeah, it's literally made from oil, like oil that is used to power homes and trains.
Well,
there
we're
a
a little low
slick
on
on top of
diesel.
that?
Pour the Papa John's garlic dipping sauce in there.
If the words Papa John's enter into any conversation, something has gone horribly wrong. Like, we have no standards whatsoever.
Every once in a while, we'll order it, Papa John's, and we're talking like once a year, thinking like, man, you know what? Just have some terrible food. Every time we eat it, we're like, this is garbage. Why did we do this? Every time.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's the exact right response to that. You're like, what have I? Yeah, exactly. It's just self-loathing. Like, why?
It's like
do
when
we
you
do
go to
this?
the bar and you order 12 mozzarella sticks. You're like, man, I just need to whatever. It's been a day, and then you eat 6 of them. You're like,
And you're like, what
I'm
did
an
I?
idiot.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. I'm familiar with self-loathing. I get it.
Made a career of it. So Microsoft's got an AI event today at sometime EST. I think 1, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
So we'll probably see the
This
new
is
Bing Bong.
these guys are tripping over each other to announce stuff.
Apparently, Apple's having an event too, like an internal thing about their AI stuff this week.
So we should talk about that actually, because this gets into the MPU conversation, which I think is the important bit. Apple does not have the AI in the cloud type resources that say Microsoft, Google, and maybe Amazon have, right?
Mhm.
They just don't. And as a response to that, what Apple started doing was they designed their own chips and they started building MPUs into the chipsets, right? They call it the neural engine. And, it's kind of a tough sell to understand what's going on here. Like they talk about it and you're like, I don't quite see what the advantage is here. But basically an MPU is like a GPU, but for machine learning and AI type tasks. And it accelerates those tasks and it offputs the compute from the CPU or the GPU. And so it's much more efficient. But Apple, by being limited in a certain way, meaning cloud-based AI, they actually stumbled onto something that's kind of profound, which is that you can keep that stuff on the device, and it's actually more powerful. The most powerful configuration is if you have both, where you can fall back to the cloud if you don't have it on the device. So Apple will market it like privacy, like what happens on iPhone stays on iPhone. That's great. But, Google does this stuff on their devices, and they're like, they'll talk about, hey, this particular action stays on the device, so it's super private. But they also have the stuff up in the cloud, so they can do that kind of, both ends of the spectrum kind of a thing. Microsoft is going to have this capability soon with PCs, right? The first MPUs arrived in like Qualcomm-based PCs, which like 7 people use. Panos Panay was just on stage with what's that woman's name? Lisa Su, I think,
Mhm.
the
AMD.
CEO of
Yep.
AMD, talking about a very specific chipset from AMD that has an NPU built into it. But Intel has NPU add-ons for the current 13th gen desktop chips and will be integrating them into the new gen that's coming. So we're going to be living in this NPU world that Apple didn't invent NPUs, but I mean, in some ways they invented the model, for having both. Or well, they didn't invent the model, but they push the rest of the market toward this model, I think is the way to say it. It's very interesting. Like, I think I'm curious to see how Apple handles this, because they're always going to be limited by the fact that they're stuck with what they have on the device, pretty much.
I think the more interesting one here is what happens if ChatGPT becomes a very good search engine and then Microsoft starts buying the default search experience on Apple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Takes it away from the Googs. Who knows?
That's the thing. Like Google pays, I don't know the number, maybe you remember, several billions, maybe over 10 billion a year, whatever it is, to stay on Apple as the default engine. These two companies can't stand each other.
Mm-hmm.
And yet this little bit of commerce occurs every year. Imagine losing that market, right? Apple just announced that they now have over 2 billion active devices. Yep. 1 point something of those are just iPhones, 1.2 something. I don't know what the number is, but that's not just a big chunk of the world. It's the most lucrative chunk of the world.
It's a lot of searches.
Yeah. Yep. And they're searching for expensive stuff, right? Mm-hmm. They're not looking for the local Papa John's. They're looking for,
the around the corner Pizza Hut.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
Got to get that stuffed crust.